James Carter's head throbbed as he woke up on the cold, hard ground. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought he was still in his cargo ship. But the rough stone beneath him and the faint smell of burning metal told him otherwise. He had crashed. Flashes of memory came back, his ship caught in a gravity well, alarms blaring, the violent shake of impact. He groaned and tried to sit up. His hands wouldn't move. They were bound. Panic shot through him. He looked around and found himself in a dimly lit chamber, surrounded by towering alien figures. Their purple skin shimmered under the blue lights of the room. Their golden eyes stared at him, cold and unreadable. Zorvani. James had heard of them. A warrior race, rulers of dozens of systems. Humans were nothing more than lesser beings to them. If they had captured him, things were bad. A tall figure stepped forward. She was different from the others. Her presence alone demanded attention. Her armor gleamed, black and silver, and a flowing dark cape trailed behind her. A sharp, regal face framed by violet hair gave her an air of authority. "Human," she said, her voice strong and commanding. "You stand before Princess Catalvana of the Zorvani Empire. You are a trespasser in our territory. The punishment is death." James swallowed hard. "Great, just great. Look, Princess, I didn't mean to drop by uninvited," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "My ship crashed. No weapons, no threats. Just a pilot trying not to die in deep space." The gathered Zorvani murmured, unimpressed. Zalvana stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Whether you came by choice or by accident does not matter. You are here, and our laws are clear." James clenched his fists. "This is it. They're really going to execute me." Then she smirked. "However, there is another way." The room fell silent. James felt the weight of the moment press down on him. "You will be spared," Salvana continued, "if you become my consort." James blinked. "You're what?" "My husband," she said, as if the words were obvious. "By Zorvani law, I must take a mate before I claim the throne. A strong warrior, an outsider, one who proves his worth." James laughed. He couldn't help it. This was insane. "You think I'm a strong warrior?" He looked down at himself. Just a human in a tattered flight suit, still sore from the crash. "Lady, I'm a cargo pilot. I haul supplies, not swords." Zalvana's golden eyes gleamed with amusement. "You have spirit, but spirit alone is not enough." One of the guards stepped forward, raising a massive blade. "If you refuse, human, you die." James felt his stomach drop. He had been in tough spots before, but nothing like this. Marry an alien princess, or get executed. His mind raced. There has to be a way out. If he agreed, maybe he could buy time, figure out how to escape. If he refused, well, that wasn't an option. He took a deep breath and looked up at Salvana. "Fine. I'll do it." The room burst into whispers. Some Zorvani looked angry. Others seemed intrigued. Salvana studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Good," she said. "Then prepare yourself, human. The ceremony is soon." James wasn't sure if he had just saved his life, or doomed himself in a whole new way. James Carter stood in the grand halls of the Zorvani Palace, his wrists finally free from the bindings. He should have felt relieved. Instead, all he felt was trapped. Towering pillars of dark stone stretched high above him, the walls carved with glowing symbols that pulsed like living veins. Strange alien music echoed in the background, and golden lights flickered like floating fireflies. It was beautiful, but James knew better. This place wasn't a palace. It was a cage. Beside him, Princess Azalvana walked with her head held high. She wore a flowing dark robe over her battle armor, a mix of elegance and strength. Every Zorvani they passed lowered their heads in respect, or fear. James noticed the way some of them glared at him. Their golden eyes were full of disgust. He didn't need to understand their language to know what they were thinking. A human. Unworthy. Weak. A joke. James clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Complaining wouldn't change the fact that he was now engaged to an alien warrior princess. They reached a massive chamber, where a long table was set for a feast. Meats sizzled on golden plates, strange glowing fruits filled large bowls, and tall crystal goblets held some kind of blue liquid. It all smelled good, but James had zero appetite. As Elvana sat at the head of the table, a servant gestured for James to sit beside her. As soon as he did, the whispers around the room grew louder. From the other side of the hall, a tall Zorvani male stood up. His skin was darker than the others, his silver armor marked with symbols of high rank. His sharp golden eyes locked onto James like a predator studying its prey. "This is an insult," the male spat. His voice was sharp and full of anger. "A human as consort. A weakling with no honor." Zalvana sighed, as if she had expected this. "General Torven, you doubt my choice." "I doubt his worth," Torven growled. "You are the future ruler of the Empire. You need a mate who is strong. This thing does not belong here." James felt the heat of many eyes tearing at him, waiting for his reaction. He exhaled slowly. "Stay calm, Carter. Stay alive." "Look, buddy," James said, leaning back in his chair. "I didn't ask for this either. But here I am. So unless you plan to kill me, you'll just have to deal with it." A few gasps echoed through the hall. No one spoke to a Zorvani general like that. Torven's eyes flared with rage. He grabbed a knife from the table and threw it straight at James. James barely had time to react. His instincts kicked in. He ducked. The blade whizzed past his head and stuck into the wall behind him. Silence filled the room. Zalvana let out a slow breath and turned to Torven. "Are you finished?" Torven's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Zalvana's golden gaze hardened. "You forget your place, General. The human is my choice. If you have a problem with it, you may challenge me." Torven clenched his fists, then bowed stiffly. "Forgive me, Princess." James could still feel the tension in the air, but the conversation was over. For now. Later that night, after the feast, James was taken to his new living quarters. The room was massive, filled with strange furniture made of smooth, dark stone and soft, fur-like cushions. The walls glowed faintly with shifting patterns, like they were alive. Despite the luxury, James still felt like a prisoner. The doors slid open, and Elvana entered. She studied him for a moment before speaking. "You handled yourself well tonight." James scoffed. "Yeah. Well, nearly getting a knife to the face wasn't part of my plan." She smirked slightly, but it faded quickly. "They do not trust you. They see humans as weak. If you want to survive here, you must prove them wrong." James folded his arms. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" Zalvana stepped closer. "Tomorrow, you begin combat training." James blinked. "Combat? Him? Hold on, who said I wanted to fight?" "You don't have a choice," she said simply. "If you fail, they will kill you. Or worse, they will kill me for choosing you." James swallowed hard. Great. Not only was his own life on the line, but so was hers. Zalvana watched him for a long moment. "Get some rest. You will need it." Then she turned and walked out, leaving James alone with his thoughts. He sat on the edge of the strange alien bed and ran a hand through his hair. He was stuck in this mess, and if he wanted to survive, he had to become more than just a cargo pilot. Tomorrow, his real fight would begin. James Carter woke up to the sound of metal doors sliding open. He groaned and sat up, rubbing his eyes. His body was still sore from the crash, and now he had another problem: combat training. Standing in the doorway was a Zorvani warrior, taller than James by at least a foot. His violet skin shimmered under the dim lights, and his golden eyes held no warmth. He wore dark battle armor with a crest on his chest, marking his rank. "Get up, human," the warrior ordered. "It is time." James sighed and swung his legs over the bed. "No breakfast," he muttered. The warrior ignored him and turned, expecting James to follow. The training grounds. James stepped into a massive arena, its floor made of smooth stone. Tall walls surrounded it, with dozens of Zorvani soldiers watching from above. Some whispered, some laughed. They were all waiting for him to fail. Vzalvana stood near the center, her arms crossed. She was dressed in battle gear, black armor with silver accents, a long sword strapped to her back. She looked at James with calm, unreadable eyes. "Listen well, human," she said. "Today, you fight. If you run, you will be seen as weak. If you refuse, you will be seen as a coward. Either way, you die." James let out a breath. "No pressure, huh?" She ignored his sarcasm and nodded toward a line of weapons placed on a stone rack. "Choose one." James walked over and looked at the selection. Swords, spears, daggers, staffs, all designed for warriors twice his size. He grabbed a short blade, testing its weight. It was still heavy, but at least he could lift it. Vzalvana gave a small nod. "Good. Now survive." James barely had time to react before a massive Zorvani warrior charged at him. The first fight. The warrior swung a heavy spear, and James jumped back just in time. The weapon slammed into the ground, sending dust flying. James's heart pounded. He had no combat training. He was just a cargo pilot. The warrior attacked again, this time with a downward strike. James did the only thing he could. He dodged. The crowd above booed. They wanted to see a fight. "Stand and fight, human," someone shouted. James gritted his teeth. He couldn't just dodge forever. When the warrior attacked again, James ducked low and rolled to the side. The moment the Zorvani turned, James lashed out with his sword. The blade cut across the warrior's leg. Not deep, but enough to make him stumble. The crowd gasped. The warrior growled, furious now. He swung wildly, but this time, James was faster. Dodge. Move. Strike. James wasn't stronger, but he was smarter. After another quick cut to the warrior's arm, Vzalvana raised a hand. The fight was over. The crowd murmured. The human had survived. He wasn't strong, but he wasn't helpless either. Vzalvana stepped forward. "You fight with instinct. That is good, but instinct alone will not save you next time." James let out a shaky breath. "Next time." Vzalvana smirked. "Training is far from over, human." The council's plan. Meanwhile, deep within the palace, General Torven stood before the Zorvani High Council. "The human is weak," one elder said. "He does not belong here." Torven bowed his head. "Princess Vzalvana protects him, but she makes a mistake. The empire cannot be ruled by someone who chooses a lesser being." The council members nodded. Vzalvana's rule was already in danger. "If the human dies, her position will weaken," another elder muttered. Torven smirked. "Then let us make sure he does not survive his next battle." The next challenge. Back in the training grounds, James wiped sweat from his forehead. His arms ached, his legs burned, and every muscle in his body screamed at him to stop. But he couldn't. He wouldn't. Vzalvana watched him carefully. "You learn fast, human. But tomorrow, you will face a true test." James frowned. "What kind of test?" Her expression darkened. "One that will determine if you live or die." James swallowed hard. Whatever was coming, it wasn't just training anymore. It was war. James Carter stood in the middle of the Zorvani training arena, sweat dripping down his face. His arms felt heavy, his legs burned, and every muscle in his body begged for rest. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Because this was not just training. This was a test designed to kill him. Above the arena, hundreds of Zorvani warriors gathered on the stone balconies, watching from the shadows. Some whispered among themselves. Others smirked, expecting James to fail. Zolvana stood at the edge of the arena, arms crossed. Her golden eyes were sharp, unreadable. Was she worried? James couldn't tell. A deep voice echoed across the chamber. "Bring in the challenger." A massive steel gate rumbled open, and the ground trembled beneath James's feet. From the darkness beyond, a giant figure stepped forward. James's stomach dropped. Oh no, it wasn't just another Zorvani warrior. It was a Gorvak beast, a towering creature 8 feet tall, covered in thick, armored skin. Its glowing red eyes locked onto James, its jagged claws scraping against the stone floor. James turned to Exalvana, disbelief in his eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." She remained silent. The beast roared. The air shook, and then it charged. The deadliest trial. James had no time to think. The Gorvak lunged, swinging a massive claw. James rolled to the side just as the ground cracked where he had been standing. Dust filled the air. James coughed and scrambled to his feet. The beast turned, faster than something its size should be, and swung again. James barely managed to lift his sword. The impact sent shockwaves up his arm, nearly knocking the weapon from his grip. He staggered back. This thing was too strong. The Zorvani audience laughed from above. To them, this wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. James gritted his teeth. No, he wasn't going to die here. Using his strength, the Gorvak charged again, but this time, James was ready. Instead of dodging backward, he ran toward it. The creature swiped. James slid under its arm, feeling the wind of its claws just inches from his head. He slashed his sword across the Gorvak's side. The blade barely pierced its thick hide, but it was something. The beast roared, spinning toward him. Its tail lashed out. James tried to dodge, too slow. The tail slammed into his ribs, sending him flying. Pain exploded in his chest as he crashed onto the stone floor. The world spun. He tasted blood. Above, the Zorvani warriors cheered. James groaned, pushing himself up. His ribs ached, but he forced himself to stand. Across the arena, the Gorvak charged again. James exhaled. Think, Carter. He couldn't match the beast's strength. But he didn't need to. The final move. The Gorvak lifted its claw, ready to crush him. James saw his opening. He ran straight at the beast. The Zorvani gasped. The Gorvak swung down. At the last second, James slid beneath its legs, sword raised. Slash! His blade tore through the beast's exposed stomach. The Gorvak howled in pain. James rolled to his feet, turned, and with everything he had left, drove his sword into the creature's neck. The Gorvak staggered, choking. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, it collapsed. Silence. Then, cheers. James panted, gripping his sword with shaking hands. He had won. A shift in the crowd. James looked up at the audience. The same warriors who had mocked him now looked at him with respect. Econ General Torven, standing in the shadows, narrowed his eyes. His plan had failed. The human had survived. As Alvana stepped forward, studying James. Finally, she spoke. "You are stronger than I expected." James gave a tired grin. "I get that a lot." She nodded. "You have proven yourself today, human. But your real battle is far from over." James sighed. "Why do I feel like that's bad news?" Zalvana smirked. Because it was. James Carter collapsed against the cold stone walls of the arena, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The Gorvak beast lay motionless at his feet, and the crowd's cheers still echoed in his ears. He had done it. He had survived. But as he caught his breath, reality began to sink in. This wasn't over. The Zorvani might respect him now, but that didn't mean they'd stop testing him. His ribs still throbbed where the creature's tail had struck him. His muscles were sore from the battle, but in the back of his mind, a new fear began to creep in. What else would they throw at him? As Alvanna stepped down into the arena, her boots clicking softly on the stone floor, she walked toward him with a look of approval on her face, though her golden eyes were still sharp. "You did well," she said, her voice calm but firm. James winced as he straightened up, trying to mask the pain. "Yeah, I'm sure the Gorvak thinks so too." She didn't smile, but there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "The Gorvak is not a challenge for you now, but the trials will only get harder from here." James raised an eyebrow. "You've got to be kidding me. I barely survived this one." Her gaze grew serious. "The Empire will not follow a leader who cannot face challenges. You must prove you are worthy to stand by my side." James couldn't help but snort. "I didn't sign up for this." Zalvanna's gaze softened for a moment. "No, but you chose to fight, and now you will continue to fight, whether you wish it or not." James didn't know how to respond. His thoughts raced. Was he really in this deep now? What if he failed? The decision to fight. Later that night, James lay in his quarters, staring at the strange alien ceiling above him. His mind raced, replaying the battle over and over again. He had beaten the Gorvak, but he had done so by luck, not skill. And if they threw something worse at him next time, would he survive? The door slid open, and Alvanna stepped inside. James didn't bother sitting up. "You didn't come here to check on me, did you?" "No." Her voice was quiet, almost softer than usual. "I came to make sure you understand what is at stake here." James glanced at her. "I understand that if I fail, I die." She nodded slowly. "And if you fail, you also dishonor me." James turned to face her. "And if I win?" Zalvanna was silent for a moment, her golden eyes studying him. "If you win, you will prove to the Empire that humans are not weak, that we are not the only species capable of ruling the stars. You will give me the strength I need to take the throne." James didn't know what to say. He wasn't a ruler. He wasn't even a fighter. He was just a pilot, stuck in a deadly game he never asked to play. "You don't have to do this," Zalvanna continued, her voice quieter now. "You can leave the Empire. I will not stop you." James shook his head. "And what happens to you if I leave? You won't have a consort, and the Empire will tear itself apart." "No, I'm not leaving. But I can't fight forever, either." She seemed to consider his words. After a long pause, she spoke again. "You won't have to fight forever, but if you survive long enough, the Zorvani will follow you. They will see your worth." James looked up at her. There was something in her eyes now, a hint of trust, maybe even something deeper. "Is this really the only way?" he asked quietly. Zalvanna took a deep breath. "Yes, it is." The challenge grows. The days that followed were filled with more grueling training. James had no time to rest. Every morning, he was pushed to his limits, sparring with warriors, running obstacle courses, and learning the ways of the Zorvani in combat. Despite his lack of natural ability, James found that his mind was his best weapon. He couldn't match the Zorvani in strength or speed, but he had something they didn't: the will to survive. The fights were fierce, and each time he stepped into the arena, the stakes grew higher. More powerful opponents, bigger creatures, and the pressure mounted. James began to feel the weight of his choice pressing down on him. But no matter how tired he was, no matter how much he wanted to give up, he didn't. He couldn't. Every time he fell, he got back up. And the Zorvani started to notice. An unexpected alliance. One afternoon during a break in training, James sat alone in the palace courtyard, nursing a wound on his side. The sting of the injury wasn't as bad as the sting of realization that was slowly creeping in. He was changing. He was no longer just a pilot trying to survive. He was becoming something else, something stronger. As he thought about this, a figure approached him. It was General Torven. James stood up quickly, but Torven raised a hand. Sit. I have no intention of fighting you today. James narrowed his eyes. Then what do you want? Torven paused, his golden eyes studying him. I see your determination. You have proven you are worthy to stand by the princess's side. James snorted. And why would you care? Torven stepped closer, his tone serious. Because the Empire is changing. If Sylvana rules, it will be different. But there are those who want things to stay the same. They want the old ways, the brutal ways. James wasn't sure what Torven was getting at. What are you saying? Torven's voice dropped to a low whisper. I'm saying you have a choice. Fight for Sylvana, or fight against her. James blinked. This was it. The crossroads. The point where his future would be decided. I've already made my choice, he said, his voice steady. I fight for her, no matter what. Torven studied him for a long moment before giving a sharp nod. Then you have chosen wisely. James Carter stood at the edge of the Zorveni training arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The final test was about to begin. After weeks of grueling challenges, this was the moment that would decide everything. Sylvana had told him the fight would be different this time. No more creatures or pulled sparring matches. This was a battle for the throne, and James's survival. He glanced around. The arena was packed with Zorveni warriors and officials. Even the High Council was present, their cold eyes watching him like hawks. They weren't here to support him. They were here to see if he was truly worthy of standing beside Sylvana. Behind him, Sylvana stood tall and silent, her golden armor gleaming in the light. She had trained him, pushed him, and now she was trusting him to prove himself. James swallowed. No pressure. The opponent. The gate at the far side of the arena rumbled open, and a figure emerged. James's eyes widened. It wasn't just another warrior. It was Torven, the general, the one who had always watched James with cold, calculating eyes. And now it was clear why. He was James's final opponent. Torven was armed with a long, curved blade that reflected the harsh light of the arena. His dark armor blended into the shadows, and his posture was perfect, like a predator about to strike. James's heart raced, but he forced himself to focus. Torven was no ordinary fighter. He had fought in battles, led armies, and survived countless wars. And now he was standing in front of James. Prepare yourself, human. Torven's voice was like gravel, deep and harsh. I will show you the strength of the old ways. Sylvana's voice came from behind James. Remember what you've learned. This is your final test. Fight smart. James nodded. This wasn't just about strength. It was about strategy, about surviving long enough to make the right move. The battle begins. The two men faced each other. The arena was silent. Everyone was waiting for the first move. Torven's eyes never left James. He circled slowly, waiting for James to make a mistake. James didn't move. He watched his opponent carefully. Every breath, every slight twitch in Torven's muscles told him something. He had to stay calm. Finally, Torven attacked, his blade flashing toward James with terrifying speed. James barely managed to dodge, his own sword raised to block the attack. The force of the strike nearly knocked him off balance. Torven was fast. Too fast. The general swung again, and James had to leap back to avoid the blade's sharp edge. His heart raced as he realized just how much he had underestimated his opponent. This wasn't just about winning. This was about surviving. The moment of doubt. James stumbled, his foot catching on a loose stone in the arena. Torven was already in front of him, ready to strike. James's sword was too slow. He could feel his body growing tired from the constant movement. Could he keep this up? For a split second, doubt crept in. What if I'm not good enough? What if I die here? But then he remembered something. He had already survived the Gorvak. He had survived every challenge they had thrown at him. He had made it this far because he kept moving. He kept fighting. And he wouldn't stop now. Turning the tide, Torvend swung his blade again, but this time, James was ready. He stepped aside, just as the blade whizzed past him. With a swift motion, he struck at Torvend's side, his sword slicing through the general's armor. The crowd gasped. James had landed a hit. Torvend growled, spinning to face him. But this time, he was slower. James had opened a small wound, and it made Torvend hesitate for a moment. James didn't hesitate. He pressed the attack, moving in with quick, sharp strikes, forcing the general onto the defensive. He couldn't win by overpowering Torvend, but he could outsmart him. Torvend's eyes flashed with anger. He was losing control, and that gave James an advantage. The general swung wildly, but James danced around him, his sword finding small gaps in Torvend's defenses. Finally, James saw it, the perfect opening. Torvend raised his blade for a final strike, but James dodged low, rolling beneath Torvend's guard. With a quick, well-aimed thrust, James drove his sword into Torvend's side, just beneath the armor. The general stumbled, his breath catching. He looked at James in disbelief. "You?" Torvend gasped, his voice weak. "You're stronger than I thought." Victory and consequences. Torvend dropped to one knee, clutching his side. The arena was silent. James stood over him, panting, his body aching. The sword in his hand trembled. He had won. But as he looked around, he realized the victory wasn't just for him. It was for Zolvana. The Zorvani High Council, who had once doubted him, now looked at him with a new understanding. They could see it now. The human had proven himself. He wasn't just a pawn in their game. He was someone who could lead. Zolvana stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You did it, human," she said, her voice soft, but filled with pride. James wiped the sweat from his forehead, exhaustion settling over him. "I didn't do it alone." Zolvana smiled slightly, though her eyes were serious. "No, but you proved that together we can do anything." The final battle was over. The arena, once filled with tension and noise, now stood silent. James Carter had won the respect of the Zorvani, but what came next was even more daunting than the trials he had faced. He stood in the center of the arena, bloodied and bruised, his sword still in hand. Around him, the crowd was still, every eye fixed on him. Some were in awe, others were filled with uncertainty. But no one could deny it now. James had earned his place. Zolvana stepped down from the raised platform, her golden eyes meeting James. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced with something softer, pride, respect, and maybe even a hint of something more. "You did it," she said quietly, her voice carrying over the stillness of the arena. "You have proven yourself worthy." James wiped the sweat from his brow, still catching his breath. The fight with Torvend had taken everything out of him. His muscles were sore, his body aching, but there was something else now, a sense of purpose. He had been thrown into a battle for survival, but now, it seemed like he had found his place in this strange world. "I'm just glad it's over," he said with a tired smile. He didn't know what to feel anymore. Had he truly earned the right to stand beside her, to fight alongside her in this war for the throne? Or had this been just another test, one that would only lead to something even more dangerous? Zolvana's eyes softened. "It's not over yet. The Empire is still divided. There are many who still want to see me fail. The Zorvani do not follow easily, and those who supported Torvend will never accept me without a fight." James nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had seen the way the High Council had looked at him after his victory. It was one thing to prove he was strong enough to fight. It was another thing entirely to prove he was strong enough to lead. "And what about Torvend?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder at the fallen general, who was now being escorted away by guards. The once feared leader looked defeated, but not broken. James knew it wasn't the end for him. The Zorvani were a proud people, and there was always someone willing to challenge power. Zelvanna's expression grew cold. He is not finished, but neither am I. The war for control of the throne is not over, James. It will be a long road, and you will need to be ready. James straightened up, trying to ignore the pain in his body. I'm ready. What comes next? A new alliance. The days following the battle were filled with preparations. Zelvanna took James through the halls of the palace, showing him the hidden corridors, the places where the High Council met in secret, and the locations of the many factions that supported her, or in some cases, hated her. James had been a soldier before, but this was a different kind of war. It wasn't fought with guns or bombs. It was fought with politics, with loyalty, and with carefully chosen words. He quickly learned that the Zorveni were just as dangerous with their alliances as they were with their weapons. Zelvanna and James spent countless hours in private meetings with the leaders of various factions, convincing them to throw their support behind her. There were moments when things seemed hopeless. The divisions within the empire were deep, and the resistance to Zelvanna's rule was strong. But James could see it now. The Zorveni respected strength, and Zelvanna had proven she had it. One evening, after a long day of negotiations, Zelvanna and James stood together on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the sprawling city below. The sky was darkening, and the first stars began to appear, their light shimmering over the vast landscape. James glanced at her, seeing the weight of leadership in her eyes. "You don't have to do this alone, you know," he said softly. "I'm with you, no matter what." Zelvanna turned to him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I know. That is why I need you." The storm on the horizon. But despite their efforts, the storm was far from over. 1 week later, the full strength of the resistance revealed itself. A faction of loyalists to Torven, along with several other factions that had remained neutral, launched a surprise attack on the palace. The Zorveni civil war had officially begun. James found himself once again in the heart of battle, but this time the stakes were much higher. Zelvanna had made it clear that this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about their future, about the future of the Empire. James, now more skilled than before, fought with a determination he hadn't known he had. His sword flashed in the moonlight as he cut down enemies left and right, his movements more fluid and precise than ever. But it wasn't just about physical strength anymore. He had learned to fight with his mind, using strategy and quick thinking to outmaneuver their attackers. Zelvanna was by his side, her leadership guiding their forces. Together, they became an unstoppable force, pushing back the resistance and reclaiming the palace's outer defenses. After hours of fighting, the last of the resistance forces was finally driven back. James stood beside Zelvanna, breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his face. He had survived another battle, but he knew this was just the beginning. The future. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the blood-stained battlefield. James stood on the balcony once more, looking out at the city. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Beside him, Zelvanna stood, her gaze focused on the horizon. The look in her eyes was one of resolve, but also of uncertainty. The Empire was still divided, and their fight was far from finished. James turned to her. "What happens now?" Zelvanna met his gaze, her expression strong. "Now we rebuild. Together. The throne may be mine, but it is not truly mine until the people believe in it." "And they will," James said firmly. "They will, because we will lead them." For the first time since he arrived in this strange world, James felt something powerful stir within him. Hope. They had faced countless trials together, and now their path forward was clear. There would be more battles, more struggles, but together they were unstoppable. The future of the Empire was in their hands, and with Zelvanna at his side, James knew they would face it with strength, courage, and hope.